Okay, so I'm going to do two stories for you. The first, if you've ever been in a hospital, you will understand this story. It's called The Hospital Night from Hell. We were sitting at dinner, my wife and I were laughing about how hard it was to kiss now that we were both wearing glasses, which had followed a discussion of some back trouble I was having, which had followed another discussion of some knee trouble she was having, which had followed another discussion about some stomach trouble I was having. The whole time we were talking, my son was sitting there with his fork poised in the air, staring at us in disbelief. Finally, he said to his daughter, who had just returned from college, he said, "Do you see what I have to put up with all year?" I know how he felt. When my parents used to discuss their physical problems at dinner, I couldn't believe it. It was like eating in a doctor's office. I vowed I would never do it. I wondered why they did it. Well, now I know why they did it, and now I do it. It's because sometimes in the 40s, your eyes start to go, and you have to position your head bird-like in order to see anything. And then your ears, you can't hear anything, and you have to smile a lot when people talk to you. Or just shake your head yes, and hope you haven't agreed to contribute something to the Yak Fund of Upper Mongolia. Your hair falls out, it turns gray, your teeth crack, you gain weight even while you're trying to lose it. And then one day you look in your bathroom mirror and you wonder how that bald-headed, gray hair around the fringe, eyeglass-wearing man with nose hair and ear hair got into your bathroom. It's all just so amazing, you have to talk about it. The chest pains began about 10:30 at night. I'd been to the club that day, and the other thing that had happened to me was my joints had given out, and I no longer could run the mile. I had to go on the treadmill with this kind of saggy butt, belly crowd. I no longer wondered what my time was in the mile. I used to wonder what I should bring to read while I worked out. And that day, not only did I do the treadmill, I went through the whole Nautilus machine route. I went from each misery-causing machine to the other like Stations of the Cross. And I'd like to say I put a lot of weight on the different machines because I was feeling buff. But to be honest, a girl was following me in the circuit, and I didn't want to seem like some kind of sissy. I was putting lots of weight on, and the last machine was called a chest press. And I remember, it's supposed to be good for the pecs. And I remember pushing it and thinking to myself, you could have a heart attack. And here I was with chest pains. I was in bed with my wife, and I said to her, Adrian, I've got some chest pains. And my wife just sat bolt upright, and in her usual combination of anxiety and complacency, she said, "You have to go to the emergency room. Your father died of a heart attack at 58. So drive over and tell me what happened." So I drove over. And when I got there, the emergency room was not like the emergency rooms on TV where everybody is running around like crazy. There's hundreds of people. There was nobody there. It had a country and western night feel to it. There was a Coke machine, a coffee machine, red and blue plastic chairs. I walked up to the nurse. She was busy writing something. She didn't even look up. I thought, wait, this is the emergency room. What is she, the angel of death? And finally she looked up and she said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I've got some chest pains." And she put her hand up. I thought she was going to ask for my insurance card, but she didn't. She pressed the button. It rang in the back. All of a sudden, a nurse came out of that room with a wheelchair. It turned into a Marx Brothers movie. She circled around me. She jammed the chair into the back of my legs. I fell into it and off we went. We burst through the doors of the emergency room. It was like, I don't know if you can remember, you used to have carnivals, and you would go into the spooky house, you'd knock the doors open. That's what it was like. Before I knew it, I was at a curtained cubicle with nitroglycerin under my tongue and attached to an electrocardiograph machine. It was just waves and waves of lines coming out of it. I couldn't believe the speed of it. It was like I was in the Indianapolis 500. You know, they were going to check me and send me out to run around the hospital a few times. Well, it was a teaching hospital. So a nurse came in, got the story, went out. Another nurse came in and got the story and went out. And then a resident came in and he got the story and went out. And another resident came in and he got the story and went out. It was like kind of like a touch team in wrestling. I thought, wait a minute, do they believe me? Is this machine not an electrocardiograph? Is it a lie detector? And then I heard on one side a man moaning, and the other side a woman with a doctor. She was obviously hard of hearing, because he said to her, what did your stool look like? She said, what? My tool? He said, no, your stool. She said, what? My tool? I was praying that she wouldn't understand. And then another resident came in. He looked worse than I did. He must have been on duty for 36 hours. He had a beard, you know, his eyes were red. He said, listen, your electrocardiograph machine, it looks fine. He said, you think it might be gas? Gas? It's like having hemorrhoids. The next day, I was teaching at the time. What would I go to school? I was in the emergency room last night. Oh, what was it? Gas. He said, have you tried Malox? I said, no. He said, wait a minute, I'm going to get some. I'll have it with you. He came back with 2 little cups. We toasted l'chaim, life, and drank it down. He said, you know, we have to admit you because of your background, your father dying so young. And so don't worry, you know, you're going to be okay. Before I knew it, I was on a gurney being pushed by a teenager down this long hall. He had like a Sony Walkman in his ears. He was kind of bopping to his own beat. And all of a sudden another guy showed up with the old fellow on a gurney, and the 2 teens were talking about the hot dates they had over the weekend. I remember the guy looked at me, but they put me on an elevator to go to the ICU. I thought maybe private elevator. Public elevator. There were 3 women standing there. They were all looking at me. One had flowers. It looked like she was just going to put them on my chest. We got up to ICU and they attached me to the TV over the bed, and I loved it. With those little things that are like little rubber cups. I remember from like dart games when I was a kid. Well, they attached me up there, and I thought I could see every little heartbeat. The line would go up. I thought, oh, I'm going to control this with yoga meditation that I learned when I was younger. I started doing it. The line was jumping all over the place like crazy. I looked at myself, and in that hospital gown, you know, it comes up to your thighs, it's open in the back, and they put their name on it as if they think someone will steal it. There were cords coming out in all directions. I looked like RoboCop in a miniskirt. And then a nurse came in and she said, I have some questions to ask you. I said, I'm not answering any more questions until I talk to a lawyer. She said, no, these are different. And they were different. The first question was, do you dress yourself? And if I were wearing clothes, I would have looked at my fly to see if it was open. Do you shop alone? Again, I had no idea why she was asking me. She said, can you make love? I put on my best Valentino look. And God bless her, she was so young, she ran out of the room. And then a doctor came in and she said, you know, I don't think you're having a heart attack. Everything looks fine, but we're going to keep you overnight. We're going to do a test. It'll see if there's muscle damage. But I don't expect that to happen. Get a good night's sleep. Oh yeah. Sleep in a hospital? It's an oxymoron. Sleep, hospital, they don't go together. They don't let you sleep. The nurses, they sit there at their stations until you do finally fall asleep, and then they rush in, flip on the lights, and yell, "We're here to take your vitals!" As if sleep isn't vital. But I did fall asleep. I imagine those little sort of like sheep jumping over a fence. And it wasn't the nurses that woke me up. I woke up at 3 in the morning because I looked at the clock, and there were 2 guys in my room. One guy was going through the dresser where I had my stuff. And the other guy was like really big, and he was just standing there smiling at me. I thought of George and Lenny from Of Mice and Men. I said, "What are you doing?" The little guy said, "We're taking your valuables." I said, "What?" And as if I'd come from another country, he said, "We are taking your valuables." I thought, what a polite thief. And then the big guy leaned over, pointed at the little guy's chest, and he said, "He's training me." Training him in a heart patient at 3 in the morning. And I could have had a heart attack. I didn't get to sleep. I didn't sleep long. I woke up at about 6 in the morning because it was time for rounds. Now, I don't know if any of you ever watched All My Children, but the doctor who swept in looked like Joe Martin. He was wearing a white shirt, a power red tie, a blue coat. His white coat was open. A bevy of residents and nurses came in behind him, and he took up my chart, and I said, "Excuse me, I don't really know what I'm doing here. I mean, I came to the emergency room myself. Everybody says the electrocardiograph, it seems fine. I don't feel like I'm having a heart attack." And he looked at me as if he couldn't believe I was talking to him. And he couldn't believe what I was saying. He took that chart and he looked at it and he said, "Well, let me tell you why I think you are having a heart attack." And then he began to give all these figures and terms. I didn't understand a word of it. And when he finished, he put that chart down, he slapped it down and looked at me as if he'd just beaten me at ping pong. And then he swept out with another word with all those nurses and residents behind him. When he left a little bit later, the doctor from the night before, she came in and she said, "I don't know how to explain it, but the test showed some muscle damage. So it might be a heart attack. We're going to give you another test. We'll say whether it's the heart muscle or just another muscle." Well, that began my life review. I tried to think of men with heart attacks that I knew before 50. I could think of 2 that both died. I decided to change my life. I was going to exercise more. I was going to eat less. I was going to go back and do more meditation, reduce my stress. I felt like Ozzie from Ozzie and Harriet. I felt really good. And then sometime in the afternoon, a nurse poked her head, into the room, and she said, "Are you still here?" Which is a really odd question for someone in my shape. I said, yeah. She said, "Well, you didn't have a heart attack. It was another muscle that was damaged." Well, I knew what muscle. It was the damn pack doing that crazy machine. I said, "Oh, wonderful, I can go home." She said, "Oh no, you're signed in here by your doctor. You can only go when your doctor signs you out." I said, "Wait a minute, you just told me I wasn't having a heart attack. I'll sign myself out over my doctor's orders." She got a really strange look on her face. She said, "1 minute." She ran out, she came back with an older nurse, a big canner. And the nurse folded her arms and she looked at me and she said, "Well, you can sign yourself out, but I want you to know that we're not responsible if anything happens to you. For instance, if you die. I said, that's okay. I'll take the responsibility. And I got out of the bed and I took one of those cords and I ripped it off. And I began to twirl it around. And then there was another one. I began to do a bump and grind as if I was a stripper. When I reached for the ties at the back of the gown, they ran out of the room. I felt great. I went home. Not only did I not have a heart attack, but I had this wonderful story that was going to last all the way through dinner, including a hot fudge sundae dessert. Story as far away as New Zealand, and everybody laughs. It's the same thing everywhere. The one time though, I told it at the hospital where it happened, and they were laughing. So they shouldn't have been laughing. Well, it's a Saturday festival, and I like to tell this story at the start, especially for people who've never been to storytelling festivals. And it's, people always ask me, what is it like to be a storyteller? And so I finally wrote a story about it. It's called Zen and the Art of Storytelling. And it goes like this. I remember I was on the phone with Mr. Hansen, and he was, selling me about telling stories at his company's picnic. I said, Mr. Hansen, storytelling needs quiet. A picnic, I don't think it's going to work. He said, no, it'll be fine. We're a bank. It's not going to be a wild picnic. I said, Mr. Hansen, are you even going to have a storytelling tent? He said, oh yeah. And I'll tell you what, I'll guarantee that tent will be at the edge of the picnic. It's going to be quiet. Well, I knew, I'd been doing this for 10 years, that this was a recipe for disaster. But he agreed to everything. When I would be on, the kind of program, and against my better judgment, I took the job. Now, when I first began storytelling, I took anything that came my way. I took a course in storytelling. I fell in love with it. I came back to my community, Evanston, Illinois. I was a teacher at the time, and I walked into the North Branch of the library because the librarian there, I had both of her kids in class. And I walked in and I said, Virginia, not only am I a teacher, I'm a professional storyteller now, and I want to tell at the auditorium downtown. She said, 1 minute. She got on the phone, she called the head of the library. She said, BJ, I got a magnificent storyteller here. If we don't sign him up right now, we're going to lose him. A complete act of faith. Never heard me tell one line of a story. And that was my first show, about 100 people, about 90 friends. And I was so scared, I thought not only would I forget the stories, I'd forget which stories I was going to tell. I had my wife in the front row with a signboard with the titles of the stories on it. I told at birthday parties, competing with crying kids and ripped up present wrapping. I told at campfires, competing with smoke and s'mores. I told Beowulf to 300 7th graders in a school cafeteria, right in front of a Coke machine. But maybe the wildest job of all when I was first beginning, it was a senior center. They called me and they asked if I would go, pro bono work. I said, Joe, sure. I get to the senior center. They don't know I'm coming. Nobody's told them. So it's like they're mad at me. The receptionist says, I'll see what we can do. And an administrator came out. She said, you wait in that room. I don't know, it was about 20 minutes later, she came back with 4 people. 3, kind of using walkers, and one guy in a wheelchair yelling, where's the lecturer? I thought with this audience, I don't need a long introduction. I'm going to go right into a real dramatic folktale. And I was not more than 2 minutes into that folktale doing some really dramatic move when I looked up and discovered my whole audience was asleep. It was a Zen moment. If you tell a story and nobody hears it, has it been told? I didn't have the heart to wake them up. I just tiptoed out. Now, as the years went on, the gigs got better. I told at the Barber Theater in Northwestern, the World Theater in Minneapolis. I said this New Zealand, festival. I told at a convention being held in Florida. They picked me up in a limo. I played with every button. I pushed the window down. I wanted to stick my head out that window and yell, "I'm not going to the prom. I'm an artist." They put me up at the Fontainebleau Hotel, a 4-room suite. One room was a wet bar, and I don't drink. They had a director. I went down, he said, "Storyteller, oh, you must want a moving spot." I thought, well, why not? I'll walk a lot tonight. Well, the jobs got better. It didn't make my day job any better. I told you I was a teacher. One Monday I came back after a wonderful festival, it was so good, and I find 5 sleepy classes. And one day, one class, in the middle of the day, I was so upset. I said, you know what? People paid to hear me speak this weekend. And one kid looked up and he said, why? I had a colleague who served a lot of my stories. He said, that's the best line of any story. Okay. So when I finally got to go to the job, I thought it was going to be okay. And then I stepped into the Grove. On my left were piles of hamburgers and hot dogs. There was a sign nailed to a tree, grub written on it. On my right was a couple of calliope playing off-key circus melodies to accompany the horse and the baby elephant that was giving kids rides around the ring. There were mimes and jugglers all over. The place was filled with tents. There was a zoo tent, a woman standing in front of it with a snake around her neck, a face painting tent, a haunted house tent. And then I saw Hanson coming to me smiling, as if I'd just come for a loan. He said, how do you like it? Well, I wanted to be polite. I said, it looks like they're having fun. Really, to me, it looked like Walt Disney done by Ken Russell. He said, well, follow me. I'll take you to the storytelling tent. And he started to go to a tent in the center of the picnic. I said, Mr. Hanson, you promised me it would be off at the edge of the picnic. He said, well, the problem was the haunted house tent didn't come. We're using the storytelling tent for the haunted house tent. We're using the eating tent for the storytelling tent. It's now an eating storytelling tent. I walked in. There were a few picnic benches in the back for people who wanted to eat. No one was eating there. There was a stage with 100 empty seats in front of it. He said, get up on the stage, walk around, it's nice. I'm clomping around the stage. He said, we have a problem. You weren't on the program, so no one knows you're doing the program. But here's what I'm gonna do. I sent for a bullhorn, and when it comes, I'm gonna walk around and announce the show. If it doesn't, this is all true now. If it doesn't come, I'm going to close everything down and I'm going to bring all the kids in here. It was a kids show. I thought, oh, wonderful. Just what I need. Kids, glazed and crazy with sugar, being taken off elephants and horses to come in and hear stories. I said, Mr. Hanson, don't do that. He said, well, I hope the bullhorn comes. It didn't. So at 1 o'clock when I was about to go on, there was nobody there. We're facing 100 empty seats, and Hanson goes, okay, time. And he jumps up, runs onto the stage, gets to the microphone, gives me a lavish introduction to nobody. And he said, here, Syd Lieberman. He got my name wrong, he didn't even know it. I walked up on the stage, I turned my back to the empty seats, and I said, Mr. Hanson, there's no one out there. Nobody's here. He ignored me. He just kept applauding. He went off the stage, he went down, gave me a thumbs up, and left the tent. What was I to do? I turned around, I thanked my imaginary audience for their imaginary applause, and I did my set to nobody. I think they loved it. I let them laugh. I gave them time to cry. I thanked them for their standing ovation at the end. I thought I would do an encore. I thought maybe that's too much. I was at the side of the stage when Hanson came back. He said, "So how did it go?" I said, "They loved it." He said, "I told you, family entertainment for a family event." He said, "Oh, I'll pay you now." He took out a checkbook. He said, "How do you spell Liebman?" I said, "With humility, Mr. Hanson, with lots of humility."